Okay, so hello everyone, hope you're doing well, and we're just going to finish off with our diet and exercise lectures, just talking about some case studies, or mainly how to break them down, and how you go about answering some questions if you had them. So yeah, hope you're doing well, and let's get straight into it. So firstly, if we get some terminology out the way, so we've got, probably know a lot of these, but let's just go through them. We've got the half-horn effect. So what basically happens is, say you're part of the trial, say testing a drug, and participants may basically modify their behavior in response to being aware that they're on the trial. That's why we give kind of people a placebo, so we can see if it's actually the drug helping them, or it's just a physiological response, you know. So then we have the placebo effects, kind of the benefits seen by a drug that shouldn't have any effect. So yeah, that can also be a problem. But then that's why we have two groups of people, and then we compare them against the placebo. We also have these confounding variables and adjustments. So that can be stuff like, for example, in a study, if you're testing, for example, how people on a bad diet will have an exposure to something, then those people in the study might changing the dietary kind of components, and that can obviously interfere with the study. This can be adjusted for, but it can be challenging and imperfect. Some of the study companies obviously exploit that in a way. For example, sugary drinks, what basically do is they adjust for the components that basically cause the bad stuff, so they'll control for hyperglycemia, for example, and then you can see that the sugary drinks have no effect on the body and stuff like that. And yeah, it's basically just watch out for those when you read studies, so make sure you read and make sure that the people actually doing the study don't have any confounding interest. Then we've got causal relationship and correlation. So you probably heard that common phrase of correlation does not always mean causation. So always be careful when reading studies. Does one thing cause another, or are they just correlated, and some third party could be interfering with that in the body? Moving on, we've obviously got the social disability bias. So again, in a study, people might become health conscious and change their habits, for example, exercise more, stuff like that. Then we've got baseline, so that's basically the participants' kind of baseline of diet and healthy activity, which is very important to take before the study starts. It's going to see how improvement and make sure there's no change. Average lifestyle, and that can basically be done through questionnaires and stuff like that. We've also got these primary and secondary outcomes. If you're measuring something and you're looking for something, that's kind of your primary. So, I don't know, does fiber reduce blood pressure? And then secondary outcome could be something like reducing the risk of atherosclerosis. Heterogeneity, so that's basically spread of data, and you can easily check that using Jamovi. And if you want to find out more about heterogeneity, then just look at my Jamovi videos, and it's all explained there. Lastly, mortality and morbidity. So mortality is how many people die from, say, a disease or something. And then morbidity is basically the more people that are sick because of the disease. Okay, so we're going to talk about three types of studies here. We've got epidemiological studies. So what are kind of advantages of that? So that can be used to explore complex interactions that are poorly understood. And they often don't require extensive training or tech or any lab personnel. However, they can be difficult to control for those confounding factors. In this one, we can only show associations, and we can't really show correlation, and we can't really prove cause and effect in this study. So we also have this intervention studies, so that's when we actually do something to people. They provide evidence that a relationship is likely causal in nature because we can control for other factors. And in this one, results can be directly applied to humans because we are testing on humans. Some of the disadvantages of that, so they require participants to undergo the treatment, and obviously we need to get people signed up and make sure they understand what the risks of the study as well. And it can be difficult again to control for those confounding variables, because we don't know really what people would do when they're on the study. Then often impacted by the half-horn effect. So if they see a study that could improve their health, then we can see an effect of them changing and becoming better, even if they become maybe on the placebo, because obviously that people are randomized into those intervention and placebo groups. Also can be very costly and time consuming, because some impact in the body could take months to change. Lastly, animal, we see that so it's basically used when it's not practical to study on humans. And you can control much more of the environment, so that's some of the advantages there. But can also, obviously the disadvantage is that we can't really apply it to humans, as it would be unethical. So a quick note on ratios. Basically in studies, we've got, you can see this on the image here, the risk ratio, and also known as relative risk. And what that basically means here, so I've got the probability of harm being done. So if this RR is over 1 means that you're more likely to be harmed by the event, and obviously if it's below, as you can see in the protective and harmful, you're less of a risk. So say 1 is kind of your baseline, so nothing happens when you're on this diet. For example, we've got vegetarians here, so say 1 is like your meat eaters, and you're comparing vegetarians to that. So as you can see here, most of these diseases are reduced when you're on a vegetarian diet. The main ones that we want to kind of look at are these ones where the confidence intervals don't touch the midline. This one here. So we've got ischemic heart disease and cancer incidence. So in that case, we can say it's a significant reduction in the risk of those diseases. And that can be backed up by this p-value here. So as we talked about in our statistics lectures, if that p-value is below 0.05, we can say the result is significant, and the same for the cancer incidence here. Whereas all the others, they have a p-value of above 0.05. So they're not quite significant. There's also another thing that you might see, which is a hazard ratio, and they're sometimes used interchangeably between these hazard and relative risks, because they're kind of closely correlated. But the relative risk basically talks about the risk of harm being done. However, the risk ratio also kind of measures the same thing, but it's really more concerned about if there is a kind of hazard, but also cares about the timing and how it happened. So I wrote here the probability of danger occurring. So yeah, so for example, if there's bleach on the table, for example, there's always that hazard of someone drinking it, but then when after the actions has happened, then you've got your risk, and it basically talks about the risk of someone dying, for example, from drinking that bleach. So that's the difference there. So last we've got this little calculation in case you get some maths question and you're scared about it. We talked about kind of the daily intake of some of these macronutrients that we talked about, so your carbs, lipids and stuff like that. So you might get a question like this. So you're advised to consume 1,700 calories daily, and if you follow the guidelines, how many grams of carbs is that? From that lecture, we need about maximum 60% carbs in a diet, so a daily intake of about 60% of it being carbs. Got 1,700 calories a day, so 60% of that is 1,020 calories. But then, as we know, 1 gram of carbs has about 4 kilocalories, so we divide that number by 4 to get 255 grams, and that would be the correct answer. Of course, the 60% is kind of the cap, so then kind of the most, and that can be between kind of 45 and 60%, or 50 and 60. So there should, in the question, they'll probably give you like a range, so say like 200 and 255, and if you work out the answer, then just go for it'll be like ABC, go for the one that's in the range that you worked out, and you should be fine. So yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, and don't forget to read studies around the subjects, because they can be quite interesting. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that, and just a quick little video on calculation and kind of case studies stuff. So yeah, don't forget to check the description for books and that, and I hope you had a good day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.